Welcome to Lizzie's Workshop and this week's Mixed Media Monday. So this background that I'm working on is something that I kind of just threw together quite a while ago when I had some friends over and I was just making a background, kind of randomly adding in some collage papers and adding in a bunch of layers of paint, and using a whole bunch of stencils, and it just kind of sat there. And I think that this page is a good 2 years old. I think I started it back in 2015, and so it was time that I kind of flipped back through my pages and decided what I was going to do with this particular background. So I had been talking to somebody about the most important things in my life, or the most important gifts in my life, and it came out that I felt like my children were my most important gifts. So this page is sort of about that. It's one large bird or sparrow, whatever kind of bird you want to call it, and then three small ones because I have three children. So the paint that I'm using here is, well, I laid down the birds and I had drawn the outline with my white big brush Pitt pen. And now I'm going around that outline with the Jewel Blue Prima chalkboard paint. And the reason that I picked this paint is because I'm trying to get through the entire jar of it. I haven't gone through the whole jar yet of any of these chalkboard paints, and they're starting to get to the point where they're starting to thicken. So I felt the need to continue on with it, and I'm really sad about this paint color in particular because I really love this paint color. So trying to make my way through this jar of paint is not as horrible or as painful as I seem to be giving the impression of. I really do love this color, and so it's not an issue at all for me to be using quite a lot of it all the time. So I'm going around, I'm just using a small, it's a 1/2-inch square tip brush to get around the edges and to get nice clean edges along these outlines. And the other reason I chose this paint was because it's a nice heavy opaque paint, and it's going to take 1 or 2 coats on it, whereas if I was using my nice thin gesso to do this, I would end up having to put 4 or 5 coats on it, as I have had in the past with other projects or other times I've used this technique. So I'm just going to go around the outline and make sure that I don't have a definitive edge, just kind of smudge it out every time I go around. And then I'm going to cover the rest of the page with this paint. I did try to speed this up quite a bit, but because of the detail in the process, it does take a little bit of time. Now if you notice, I am using the lid as my palette to hold the paint, and what I do is I put a plastic cover over the top of the open paint jar so that it's not losing its moisture. And then I just used when I shook the paint before I opened it, I just used whatever paint was in that lid in order to do this project. Now if you're noticing, I only do it once. There's not a whole lot of paint in that lid, but every bit of paint for these paints goes a really long way. So that's part of the reason that I'm having to use it on so many projects, because there's so much beautiful pigment in these paints that it's going quite a long way. And I've been using this particular jar of Jewel Blue for about 2 years now, or at least 2 years now. I'm going to finish off the rest of the page. I'm going to make another layer, put another layer of paint over wherever I can see the stenciling and all that work underneath. And it's going to be a nice thick heavy layer. And now I thought of leaving it just like this and signing it off and just making it maybe like a 15-minute project, because this was the 15 minutes that I had. It took a little bit longer than that because I wanted to do it with a little bit of precision, but once I was done painting this, I had to walk away and let it dry anyway, so I thought, oh well, I won't sign it off yet, I'll just wait and see what it looks like when I come back, and I'll make some decisions from there. So as you can tell, you can't really see a lot of the patterning and texture, visual texture coming through. It's a nice heavy opaque paint that's nice chalkboard, right? So it's a matte paint and it's opaque and it really covers beautifully. So once I had let this dry overnight, I came back for my 15 minutes the following day and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this stencil, and I believe that this is also a Crafter's Workshop stencil, and I'm going to take some white gesso and I'm going to create some extra background kind of stuff on the blue portions. And I should not have used a sponge. I should have really used a baby wipe here because I wanted nice smooth edges, so I'm trying to smooth them out, but I just have way too much paint on my sponge, and so I'm just kind of adding way more white than my intention was. And it didn't even occur to me after the fact that I could have wiped some of that heaviness away by dabbing it with a baby wipe. I should have just gone straight there rather than looking at the sponge at all. But at least now I know for next time. So once that was done, I let it dry, and then I went through and I covered the birds again. And I'm taking this Stays On ink pad and some feathers. Now the feathers are from a company called the Dark Room Door, and they're just rubber mounted stamps, and it's called the feathers. There's 5 feathers in the set, and they're each about, I guess, 4 inches long or so. And I really like these feathers. I've used them in quite a few projects, I think. Whether I've shown the video for them or not, I do use them quite often. And if you notice, I'm not using a block. And the reason that I'm not using a block is I find that when I'm working in my art journal, the pages are not always smooth. Everything gets ripply from the pages below and from the page I'm working on, whether it's because I'm adding layer upon layer upon layer of paint, or whether it's from putting in different layers of collage, or what have you. I find that it gets really, really bumpy and uneven, and so putting it on a block makes it so that I don't have nice images. I don't get what I want out of the stamping. So I often use my rubber stamps without a block. And if you notice too, I'm also not cleaning my stamps after I'm finished. I just put them back in the package and close it up. Now, if you were a card maker or working with Stampin' Up! Stamps and you saw this, you'd probably be, having a heart attack. But I do have to say, I've owned stamp sets, especially the photopolymer and the acrylic stamps. I've owned a lot of them for a very, very long time. And when I go through my stash, when I do purges each year, I'm finding that the photopolymer and acrylic stamps that have had Stays On ink on them and that I have used and put back dirty, they do not shrink, they do not lose all their moisture, they do not turn yellow. It seems like their life is a lot longer. And I'm not saying like I'm 100% right. I've just noticed this trend within my own stamp set. I can also say that my grandmother gave me hundreds of rubber stamps that she would clean in the sink with dish soap, and I can tell you that they are all, in pristine condition as well. So when it comes to rubber stamps, I'm still all for cleaning them with a toothbrush in the sink with dish soap, and when it comes to the clear stamps, it seems that leaving them dirty makes them last longer. What I'm doing here is I'm adding a whole bunch of washi tape to these birds. Don't ask me why. I've seemed to have gone from this, hate for I used to have my hate on for washi tape, thinking it was a useless product, but I seem to have, since finding my stash and then collecting from all over the room and adding it to the stash and realizing how much I actually have, I've become quite a user of washi tape. Now this is interesting. The StazOn ink would not dry. I had re-inked my ink pad recently, and it was such heavy, heavy ink that the black StazOn just would not dry on the page, and I didn't want to use my heat gun on it too much because the page underneath, it has a lot of layers on it, and it would have separated out those layers. It has a lot of washi tape on it and stuff, and I didn't want to have all that come apart. So what I did is I covered all of the feathers with a pearl embossing powder, and the color is called pesto. So it's on, it's green on black, so it's not really going to show, but in different light it shines. And then I'm taking this paintbrush, and wherever there's washi tape, I'm wiping away the embossing powder because it sticks to the washi tape due to the static electricity. So that's how the embossing powder sticks, is by static electricity and moisture, and so I had to take the paintbrush and wipe it off of all the birds, or else they would have been covered with the dust from the embossing powder. And then I used my heat gun to set the embossing powder, and then I was happy that the ink wouldn't be moving anymore, and it was all nice and set. So the next step that I'm doing is I didn't leave this in the video, but I tried to do the outline in a hot pink Sharpie, and that didn't work at all. You couldn't see it. It wasn't giving the pop that I wanted it to. It wasn't doing anything that I needed it to do, and so I went back to Old Faithful here with my Stabilo all in black. I went around the outline of all of the birds, and then I took my water barrel brush and activated the Stabilo all pencil. And I did it as a black outline instead of as a hot pink. Now I don't know if maybe the hot pink did work and it's just my expectation of how it was supposed to pop that didn't meet my needs, or what. Maybe I have high expectations for the poor little Sharpie, but I really liked this a heck of a lot more. You couldn't really see the outline from the Sharpie, and now that I'm getting the black, you can see that nice clear black outline of the Stabilo all. There is something to be said for falling in love with certain tools or certain mediums, and I do have to say that one of my major go-tos for finishing off a page is the Stabilo all black pencil. You know, sometimes things are too wet and you end up ruining all your pens, or sometimes like the ball rollers in some of the pens just don't cooperate, and I fight a lot with pens, but I've never really had a problem with my Stabilo all pencils. The only issue I did once have is that when they get warm, the lead gets soft, and so with that being said, I ended up not being able to sharpen it while it was warm because it just kept falling apart. But if you have your Stabilo all pencils fall off your workbench onto a concrete floor, and then whenever you sharpen them they all just keep falling apart, you can heat them up or warm them up. Mine I just place where the vent of my laptop is, because that gets quite warm, and that warms up the inside, and it seems to bring them all back together, and then I can sharpen them again. So I'm in love with my Stabilo all, is basically what I'm trying to tell you. So once that was done, I decided I needed a border, and I've noticed this a lot in my art this year, that I keep thinking I need borders. It's like I need to contain the eye within the set parameters of the project. And if I go through all of my art journals, it hasn't been an issue. It hasn't been a trend for me until this past year. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe I'm trying to control where your eye goes. My life's a little hectic, so I'm trying to put control in where I can. Who knows? So I have been trying to analyze that a little bit, but I put this really thick white line on there with my finger, and then I used a wet wipe and kind of loosened it up and smudged it and made it less aggressive. But the gesso that I used was still quite firm, so it ended up not coming off as smoothly as I wanted. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching at Lizzie's Workshop. Come back and join us again next week for Mixed Media Monday.